I love training legs. This is how I got from hating leg day once a week to doing legs twice a week with enough intensity to stimulate muscle growth without becoming a zombie the next 3 to 4 days. So if that sounds interesting, my name is Josh and we're gonna jump right into leg day. So before we begin, we're first gonna go over the 3 talking points of this video. The first one is going to be what actually builds muscle. The second is going to be exercise programming, especially for legs. And the third one is going to be recovery and nutrition. We're gonna break these down into 3 separate parts and tackle them individually, because if you can't understand one of these, you can't have big legs. So let's jump right into it, starting us off with what actually builds muscle mass. So building muscle mass is actually very simple, and it's something that a lot of people get wrong. Now, building muscle mass, you just need 2 things. You need mechanical tension and you need motor unit recruitment. What mechanical tension and motor unit recruitment is it's the force experienced on the muscle fibers themselves. So mechanical tension is simply a slow contractile speed. If I were to curl my bicep very slowly, this technically is high amounts of mechanical tension. Now, am I building muscles from slowly curling my arm back and forth with this little marker? Probably not. And the reason for that is because of low motor unit recruitment or low fiber recruitment, right? There's not enough muscle fibers being engaged in order for me to actually resist against, right? So if a exercise or a specific movement is very easy, your brain doesn't need to send signals to as many motor units, right? It doesn't need to activate as many muscle fibers in order for your muscle to contract. That's easy, there's no resistance. But if you want high amounts of motor unit recruitment, you would then have to activate a lot of muscle fibers and generate a lot of force. So more force production equals more motor unit recruitment. That's very important, because if we're trying to recruit as much force production, we have to have a fast contractile speed, right? You got to contract very fast, and that's high fiber recruitment. But that's not mechanical tension, because we talked about mechanical tension is just a slow contractile speed. So how do we combine the 2? The answer is very simple. All we need is an involuntary slowing of the contractile phase. What does this mean? Means training till failure with good technique. Now that's super important, with good technique, but more importantly, training to failure. If you're not training to failure, if you're not getting those last couple grindy reps where you're pulling as hard as you can or you're pushing as hard as you can and the weight's just not moving with good technique, then you're not going to signal for the muscle to have any myofibrillar hypertrophy, right? The growth of the muscle fibers. Not to be confused with sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. If you want to know the difference between sarcoplasmic and myofibrillar hypertrophy, I have another video linked right here you can watch. But for right now, again, myofibrillar hypertrophy, new muscle tissue, is stimulated for growth, where you signal more growth when you get to the involuntary slowing of the contractile phase, again, training to failure or close to failure, right? High amounts of mechanical tension, slow contractile speed, and motor unit recruitment. So heavy weights, slow to failure, or slow contraction, right? That's what I'm saying here. Hopefully this is making sense so far. Let me know in the comments. So that's it. That's how muscle is built. We have to understand that we need to be pushing close to failure in stable environments with high amounts of effort. That's super important that the effort is there, especially if you're trying to train for big legs, because it's not easy to grow legs for a lot of people, not because of their genetics, but because they don't know how to stabilize and push hard enough. That's why we're gonna talk about exercise selection and how you can properly pick the exercises to get big legs so you can have high amounts of mechanical tension and motor unit recruitment. Let's talk about exercises. All right, when it comes to exercise programming, it's really important to understand that you need to be following at least these principles when it comes to programming your leg days, or if you're hitting maybe an upper lower split or a full body every other day split, you have to understand that you need enough time to recover from your previous workouts in order to effectively grow your legs, stimulus to fatigue ratios. So in order to do this, we need to understand that twice a week or 3 times weekly frequency is going to be best for seeing hypertrophy for our lower half, as well as all muscle groups. This doesn't just apply to legs. This is exercise programming just in general. There's nothing special about legs. So twice a week or 3 times weekly frequency for each muscle group. That means if you're hitting legs on Monday, for say, maybe you're on a push-pull leg split, you're hitting legs on Friday at the end of the week as well. So you're hitting it twice a week. Make sure that you're fitting that in with your other muscle groups, so that you're hitting everything twice a week or 3 times a week, depending on what your current program is. Maybe you're doing full body 3 times a week. That means you're hitting legs 3 times a week. If you're doing an upper lower split, maybe you're hitting legs twice a week. Whatever your split is, make sure you hit them at least twice, and maybe even 3 times a week if you guys are up for it. Now, the next thing is you only really need 1 to 2 exercises per muscle. Now, this is really important because when we're talking about twice weekly frequency, there's not a lot of muscles that make up your legs, right? There's 4 main muscle groups. You have your quads, your hamstrings, your glutes, your abductors, and your adductors. I ran out of fingers. And your calves, of course. These are not going to take a lot of time. You only need 1 to 2 exercises per muscle group. So if I'm doing, say, for example, say I'm hitting quads, I want to make sure that I'm having at least a squat pattern and an isolation movement for the quads. Something like a quad extension is really, really good for this. So you only need, again, to choose 1 to 2 movements per muscle group. And if you're doing full body every other day, you only really need to pick 1 workout or 1 exercise for that muscle group. So for example, if you're doing a full body split, you'd only need to do maybe a quad extension on one of your days. The next day do a squat pattern, and then the next day after that go back to doing an isolation movement. Something like that would work really well if you're trying to train quads 3 times a week. Now, this doesn't mean that you only need to do 1 exercise per muscle group. I'm just saying that you can get away with the bare minimum of 1 exercise per muscle group. So for example, like again, with the quads, you can get away with doing just a quad extension. But you really want to see the best growth when you're training with at least 2 exercises per muscle group if you're doing an isolated leg day. So for example, if I were to have my own personal leg day, I do my leg days on Mondays and Fridays for my personal program. So I'll be doing a squat pattern on Monday for my quads and my glutes, but I'll also be doing a quad extension movement for the quadricep as well. So I'm hitting quads twice technically in 1 singular session. I also do abduction and adduction by themselves on Monday, which is actually today, so I'll be hitting that later, as well as do a hamstring movement as well. But I'll only do 1 isolated hamstring movement. I'll only be doing hamstring curls. I'll do the seated hamstring curls today on my Monday leg day, and then on Friday I'll be doing a hinge movement instead of my squat pattern. So hopefully this tracks. I'm doing Monday has heavy squat pattern, quad extensions are the main focus. Abduction, adduction, calves, as well as some hamstrings thrown in. Now, on my second leg day, I'm doing hamstrings, hinge pattern, so I'm doing an RDL or an SLDL, and then I'm doing quad extensions just so that way they get twice weekly frequency, and then I'm doing calves. Oh, I'm also throwing in hip thrust on that day. Hip thrust I'm only doing 1 time a week because I am getting glute activation out of my squat pattern. So glutes are still technically being hit twice a week. So it's very minimalistic, but this allows me to get the most out of my intensity. This allows me to generate as much force as possible because I know that I'm pushing with as much output as I can, so I get as much stimulus as I can, so I can recover the whole week and then get the best gains possible. So hopefully that made sense. Now, if your goal is hypertrophy, make sure you're choosing exercises that are stable. What is a stable exercise? When we're looking for stability in an exercise, we're looking for things that are going to be very stable, either using a machine or your technique is very good on something like a barbell back squat or a Smith machine. So something where you're locked into a fixed range of motion that doesn't allow you to kind of tilt back and forth. It doesn't have any energy leakage in the form of having to balance yourself. Something like a leg press or a hack squat would be a stable version of a squat pattern, whereas something like an RDL, instead of doing it with the barbells or the dumbbells, you would do it with a Smith machine for more stability. Now, you don't always have to train in the most stable environment, but again, if your goal is to maximize hypertrophy, it's best to train in stable environments so you can get the most out of the effort that you're putting in. So if your goal is powerlifting, right? If you just want to powerlift to get strong at the big 3, well, you gotta be training squats and deadlifts. So incorporate those into your programming as required. Make sure that you're getting enough volume to get better technique, but also make sure that you're pushing with enough intensity to build enough muscle mass to actually get stronger as well. Because as we talked about in the strength video, there's only 2 ways to get stronger. Comment if you remember what they are. That's gonna be the basics for exercise programming. Again, when it comes to programming, make sure that you're hitting twice weekly frequency or a 3-time weekly frequency frequency, 1 to 2 exercises per muscle group. And by muscle group, I'm talking about your quads, your hamstrings, your glutes, etc. Make sure that you're choosing stable exercises if your goal is purely hypertrophy, and if your goal is powerlifting, choose squat and deadlift, because that's what you're going to be using on the competition. So let's move on to resting and recovery, so we can take the stimulus that we're getting from these wonderful exercises and actually grow. All right, so recovery and nutrition is gonna be the last part. Let's get through this before the sun goes down, because losing a lot of light here. Everyone's recovery is gonna be a little bit different, but this is what I recommend for the majority of people. And it's gonna get a little bit more nitpicky when we get into nutrition, but let's talk about recovery first. So starting this off, we need to be sleeping at least 7 to 9 hours every single night. Now, you've heard this a million times, sleep is where you actually build muscle. Now, that is true. We know that muscle is built when you sleep and add on new contractile proteins to the existing myofibrils, increasing their cross-sectional width, so you're making them a little bit wider and bigger. However, you stimulate that growth through that mechanical tension and motor unit recruitment, but you can't grow the tissue unless you recover the tissue. So sleep at least 7 to 9 hours. Also, is great for your hormonal health and just makes you feel better. When you're rested, your body recovers other functions too, not just muscle building. So again, 7 to 9 hours. Next, we're going to be talking about dynamic stretching and static stretching. We're going to be doing dynamic stretching before our workout. So if we have a leg day coming up, make sure that you're training with those dynamic stretches beforehand. So do something like some leg windmills, something like some fire hydrants would be really good. Opening up those legs and getting more blood flow into your hips, glutes, etc. Now, you can also do some static stretching after your workouts if you choose to for better recovery. This is going to help reduce the soreness and stiffness for a couple days after the workout as well. And you don't have to just do this after the workout. You can do this at any time when you're not going into a workout. Now, the reason why you're not going to be doing static stretching before a workout is because through static stretching, you are actually lengthening and relaxing your muscle fibers, which is going to reduce the amount of tension in your tendons and ligaments, which can cause you to be less stable in your movements. You can actually decrease some of your force output and not actually get the best out of your exercises. So it's not the worst thing in the world to do, but it will have a minor effect on your capabilities when pushing in the gym. So do your best to do static stretching after the workout or later, and dynamic stretching before the workout to increase blood flow and prevent injury. All right, next we're gonna be talking about foam rolling. Foam rolling is pretty awesome. What is foam rolling? Let me grab my foam roller and show you. All right, it's kind of hard to see because my lighting is completely gone. Let me turn on a light real quick. This is gonna be super awesome when it comes to reducing your muscle tension and muscle soreness after a workout or at a later time throughout the week. If your legs are super tight, oh my gosh, my ass is so sore, my quads are so tight, I can't sit down, use the foam roller, relax, and get more gains from it essentially. And lastly, we're gonna be talking about the sauna for recovery. The sauna is a really great tool when it comes to relaxing your muscle and reducing the amount of tension that you feel throughout the week after your leg day. Obviously, everyone knows that if you hit a leg day super hard, you're gonna be really sore for the rest of the week. And that is going to be true if you're just starting off getting into training legs with intensity. If you train with intensity and you haven't been training with intensity for a while, obviously those first couple leg days, you're gonna be cooked. But if you use the sauna, if you foam roll like we just talked about, you're going to reduce the amount of muscle soreness that you're going to experience days after your lift. So make sure that you're incorporating the sauna usage as well as using that foam roller. Now, if you're so lucky to use the foam roller in the sauna somehow, even better, because you're warm, you're relaxing the tissue, and you're rolling it out using the myofascial release techniques. So try it out, use a foam roller, use the sauna, really good for you. Make sure you stay hydrated though if you're in the sauna. Hydration with electrolytes, super important. Now, we're gonna go over basic nutrition for building big legs. This applies to any kind of muscle growth standpoint, but first and foremost, make sure you're tracking your macros. If you're not tracking your macros, you don't know what you're putting in your body, and it makes you in less control of your diet. I'm of the belief that if you have more control over the things that you put in your body, the more awareness, the more mindfulness, the better chance you have at succeeding in whatever your goal is, whether you're trying to lose weight, gain weight, or maintain your weight while losing fat and building muscle. All of this is possible if you just track your macros. just track the macros. Use something like MyFitnessPal, use a logbook, use literally whatever. Just track your macronutrients, do your best to be accurate. It takes 5 minutes at the end of your day to go in and plug in what you ate for the day, and then do it consistently enough so you know that you're hitting your macronutrients in order to get the results that you want. You can be doing all the hard work in the gym, but if you're not eating to hit your goals, you're not gonna see the results. So make sure that you're tracking your macros, please. Kind of going hand in hand with that, I'm kind of off screen. Make sure that you're eating at least 50 to 100 grams of carbs before your lift. Now, this is pretty controversial, not because carbs are bad, but because a lot of people think that, well, I can train fasted, I can train with no carbs in my system. The body doesn't need carbs in order to produce energy, which is correct. However, you're gonna feel a lot better if you have carbs in your system. What do carbs do? Carbs are a quick source of energy in the form of glucose. Your muscles need glucose in order to have high amounts of force production. So if you're training for hypertrophy, like we are, you're putting all the work into the programming, you're putting all the work into the exercises, but you're not gonna have the energy if you're not eating carbs. So if your macros allow for it, which they should, you should be getting at least 50 grams of carbs a day just to survive. Make sure you're trying to eat them before your lift, so that way you can have that energy, have the glycogen stores in your muscle, so you can push as hard as possible and really get a good growth stimulus in the gym. 50 to 100 grams of carbs at least before your leg day. Or any workout, I would say. That goes to any workout, not just legs. And lastly, we're gonna talk about staying hydrated. Make sure that you are hydrating during your lifts. Make sure you have electrolytes in your water, so that way you're not just flushing out all your electrolytes in your sweat, but you're replenishing those when you're drinking your hydration solution. Now, the average person does not drink enough water. Now, do you need to drink a whole jug a day? Probably not. However, I like to use this as a kind of a basis as how much I should drink throughout the day, because again, if your goal is to maximize hypertrophy, if you're not hydrated, you're going to feel less energized. You're going to have less blood flow. You're not going to be able to incorporate as much muscle fibers as possible, because if you don't have electrolytes in the form of sodium, potassium, magnesium, your muscles aren't going to be able to contract effectively like they would if you were fully hydrated and carbed up before your lift. So make sure that you're drinking. Try to get a gallon in. If you can only do half a gallon, start with a half a gallon, but make sure you're getting that hydration in. And that's going to be pretty much it. Recovery, we talked about what we need to do. Nutrition, we talked about what we needed to do. Hopefully this helps with your chicken leg syndrome. If you're someone that doesn't train legs, 2026 might be your year to get some big legs. Remember, it took me 3 years to go from this to this. And I enjoyed leg day. If you can make it enjoyable, you can keep it consistent. And if you can keep it consistent, you'll see the progress. So there goes my pen. So all that being said, if you guys have any questions, make sure you leave them in the comments. My name is Josh, and hopefully you guys found this video a little bit educational. Remember, if you guys need more resources on how to program your exercises, how to eat properly for your specific goals, maybe your goals are a little bit different than what we talked about, go ahead and join the school community. Link is in the bio. Sweatspherefitness.com is going to help you get not only the best results of your life, but it's going to teach you the actual mechanisms behind how muscles build, what causes muscle growth, how we can maximize your own growth potential to get the best results from where you're at. You don't have to be young, you don't have to be old. No matter where you're at in life, you can start building muscle, losing fat, and building a better, healthier life. And as a quick side note, if you guys do want help tracking your macronutrients, use our free macronutrient calculator so you can calculate what your proteins, carbs, and fats should be in order to get the best results for your growth when it comes to not just building bigger legs, but an overall healthy, better physique. So make sure you guys hit the link in the description, sweatspherefitness.com, macronutrient calculator. I'll see you guys inside the Sweatsphere.